All right, and welcome, welcome. It is the 15th of the month. I say this every month. Holy smokes, half the month's gone. I'm going to say it again. I guess I'll probably say it till the rest of my life until they clutch the microphone from my cold, dead hands. But this is Politics by Jake. I am Jake. I am your reporter. I am your commentator. I am your advisor. I am your historian. And I'm speaking from Los Angeles, the city of the angels. Each week we bring a strategic briefing. It's an overview, or it's intended to be, an overview of world shaping events, a map of the forces driving history and the moves that matter. And the aim is simple, to help those wherever they stand add their weight to the right side of history to reveal not only what's happening is what we want to do here at Politics by Jake, but why, and what it means for those determined to act. So it is that we have a weekly strategic briefing, complete with indications, suggestions, some implicit, some explicit, as far as what you can do, and indeed what should do in order to secure a better historical outcome in our time. Now, I admit, I'm playing catch up here. We all know the situation on the shutdown, that the Senate caved a week ago. I'm going to be talking about that, but I've got catch up to do. And I'm not talking about the kind you put on your French fries either. I'm talking about the time where we get together and we go over things that we should have gone over 2 or 3 shows ago, but I didn't have time for. So you remember, and you've heard me talk about the fact that Trump has destroyed a significant portion of the White House and turned it into a grand ballroom. And there was a party, a hedonistic party in there as soon as it was ready to go, and it was filled with all sorts of, the expression I guess is wretched excess, and dancing girls and champagne and so on and so forth. And the thing that got me was that there was a sign at some parapet or some archway or hanging from a railing or something like that. And it said words to the effect, I don't know if I have it exactly right, but it said words to the effect, "A little party never killed nobody." And I thought about that, and I thought about one of the great American novels, which is The Great Gatsby. And that was written by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And there was a party in The Great Gatsby. And in order to talk to you about it, F. Scott Fitzgerald, unquestionably one of the great authors in United States history, certainly of the 20th century. And so I need to tell you a little bit about this. This is the story. And we're going to get to the comparison with the demolishing of the West Wing and the party in just a minute. But you have this character, his name is Nick Carraway. He's a quiet Midwestern guy. He moves to Long Island in 1922 to learn the bond business. He rents a modest house in West Egg, which is a real place, right next to the mansion of a mysterious millionaire named J. Gatsby. And he is a man who throws enormous, roaring parties, but he never seems to join them. And across the bay, in another real place that's an actual real place called East Egg, live Nick's cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom. And that is old money, beautiful on the outside, rotten underneath. It's the one, for those of you who are scriptural buff, is when Jesus was decrying and condemning the Pharisees, and he said, "You're like whited sepulchres. It looks great on the outside; it's all painted and flowers and everything, but inside it's rotten. It's a dead men's bones and full of disease and bleh." That's what it is. So, in the book, Nick slowly discovers Gatsby's secret. He's built his entire life, his fortune, his mansion, his legend, for one reason: to win Daisy back. Daisy is the woman he fell in love with years earlier. Everything he is now is a reinvention aimed at rewinding time. So Nick sets up a reunion. Daisy and Gatsby fall into an affair. Gatsby believes he can simply erase her marriage and resume the life they once almost had. But Tom is jealous and he's furious. He exposes Gatsby's shady business ties. He pushes Daisy to retreat back into the safety of her wealth. On the drive home from a confrontation in Manhattan, Daisy, not Gatsby, but Daisy, hits Myrtle Wilson with Gatsby's car, killing her. Gatsby, ever faithful, takes the blame. Myrtle's husband, George Wilson, manipulated by Tom into thinking Gatsby was the killer, and his wife's lover shoots Gatsby and then kills himself. Nick is disgusted by the Buchanan's careless cruelty, and he returns to the Midwest. Gatsby, the dreamer, dies alone. He's abandoned by the very society he tried to join. And what it's really about is this. And believe me, I'm getting to what it is. I'm getting to the point here. At its core, the book is an autopsy of the American dream, which exists 100 years later, from the 1920s into the 2020s. It's the story of a man who believed desire could overpower reality, a world where glitter covers rot, and a reminder that wealth often protects the guilty and buries the innocent. And it ends the way America often ends its dreamers, with a gunshot, a swimming pool, and a society too busy partying to notice the cost. Okay, so are we clear on this? So now let's come almost literally 100 years later, where the American dream is still going strong. So you start with a sign. Remember, I talked about the sign? A little party never killed nobody. Painted bright, loud and smug, the kind of joke that people make when they don't want to see the cracks in their own walls. A little party never hurt anybody. That's what they said in The Great Gatsby, too. But the truth is, the party was the weapon. These parties were smokescreens. And I submit to you that the party that just occurred in the demolished West Wing and the rebuilt West Wing is a smokescreen also. They're not celebrations, and they weren't celebrations. They're bait. They're a fishing line cast into the dark, and in this case, in the book, hoping who? Daisy, Gatsby's long-lost love, would bite. And in the process, the whole crowd used the glitter to blind themselves to their lies, to their emptiness, to the rot growing under the velvet. And in this case, and this is just so germane to what has happened in the United States, the party, the spectacle of the party, and it was a spectacle. It becomes a narcotic, or like a narcotic. Daisy walks into the party like nothing was wrong. She adored the glow, she adored the music, the lavish world that Gatsby had built for her, but she never intended to pay for any of it. And when fate punched through the facade, when Myrtle died under the wheels of that yellow car, Daisy vanished, Tom vanished, and everyone retreated back into their money, leaving Gatsby exposed like a naked nerve. The party didn't kill anyone directly. The denial did. The delusion did. Now, so when I saw that sign, a little party never hurt anybody or nobody, I thought, that's the anthem of every collapsing empire. A toast raised high while the floorboards burned underneath. And at this point, I didn't expect this to go on this long, but it's important. Because everybody's talking about the shutdown, and everybody's talking about the Senate, everybody's talking about the House, everybody's talking about Angelina Grisalda, which they should, and we may get to that. But this is comment, and this is political education, and this is what we do here at Politics by Jake. So that said, let's take a break from this, and then let's come back and we will continue. Don't go away. The best is yet to come. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. If you think owning things in your own name keeps you in control, think again. In today's world, lawsuits, taxes, and predators are everywhere. That's why the smart money hides in plain sight. We help you to build legal firewalls, LLCs, land trusts, private contracts that protect your assets while keeping you invisible. Call Twain Consulting today at 310-997-2204. Find us on Facebook at Twain Consulting. That's facebook.com/Twain Consulting. Protect what you've built before someone else takes it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we're back, and we're talking about the great American novel, The Great Gatsby, and F. Scott Fitzgerald, the great American novelist, and we have some interesting comparisons to make that I hope you will enjoy. So we talked about the modern parallel 100 years ago. The Great Gatsby Fitzgerald wrote about a party that occurred literally 100 years ago. Well, not literally, give or take several years additionally. It's 2025 now. I think the party occurred in 1922, something like that. So when I saw that sign, like I said, I thought, there's something here. I've got to tell my listeners. So that's what I'm doing. So here we go from that point. Trump's celebration becomes, whether he knows it or not, he doesn't know it because he's a doofus, as I said before. He doesn't know any of this stuff. It becomes exactly what Gatsby's was. A performance of stability, a facade, a pageant of confidence, and a way to pretend that the chaos doesn't exist, a way to keep it at bay. The country's sliding. People are hurting. Debt is exploding. Rights are evaporating. The President of the United States is saying, I don't care if people don't eat. This, by the way, if I may digress, this is why the Democrats, the 8 Democrats, and people have excoriated them, and maybe rightly so, for a reason that I'll go into later because I've already talked about it before, and talking about it again would be just a reminder because they did this late. They shouldn't have been doing this late. Their strategy should not have been to engineer a shutdown. They should have been doing this on January 6th, which is Insurrection Day, or also Acclamation Day, when the votes are counted, when the Electoral College votes are counted, which would have revealed or brought to light the fact that Trump's presidency is a priori, which means from the very beginning, illegal. It's an illegal, unconstitutional presidency. Okay? So all of this stuff is happening. People are literally starving. And the president says the modern equivalent of Marie Antoinette's let them eat cake. But over here, look, I tore down part of the White House. But look what I replaced it with. Ooh, shiny, big lights, loud music, no problems. Do you see? The party is the blindfold. The party is the lie. In Gatsby's world, the party didn't hurt anybody until it did. And by then, the dreamer was floating face down in his own pool, while the people who broke him drove away without looking back. That's what happens when a nation mistakes celebration for strength. You know, one of the songs I've always loved, one of the groups that I've always loved, and maybe I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but let me just digress again, is Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And one of the wonderful songs that they covered was God Bless the Child Who Has His Own. And the words are just wonderful. You can help all yourself, but don't take too much. Mama may have, Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own. And why was that said? Because of this. And when you've got money, you've got lots of friends hanging around your door. But wait a minute, children. When the money's gone, when all your spending ends, they won't be around anymore. Yeah, rich relations may give you a crust of bread and such. You can have all you want. Just don't take too much. Mama may have, and Papa may have, but God bless the child that's got his own, because that's what life is about, folks. So again, and I want to be clear about this, because I'm making what is, and Fitzgerald was making what I think is the more profound distinction. Because as I said, nobody actually dies at one of Gatsby's parties, although the atmosphere, makes it feel like someone might. What happens is this, just to refresh your memory. Gatsby throws one of those wild champagne-soaked parties all summer long. All summer long. It's a party every night. Why? He wants Daisy to come in. When she finally reconnects with him, the parties stop. They've fulfilled their purpose. You see? Later, after a chain of lies and mistaken identity, a tragedy hits elsewhere. Myrtle Wilson is killed when Daisy, driving Gatsby's yellow car, runs her over. George Wilson, her husband, is driven mad with grief and kills Gatsby and then himself. So it is true from a certain standpoint that those parties themselves, but this is not the point I'm trying to make, those parties themselves don't kill anyone, but they do symbolize the rot under the glitter, the hangover of the excess that ends in ruin. And that's why I point out the Trump party sign. That's why it's such a setup line. A little party never hurt nobody. Except in Fitzgerald's world, and I submit to you, in this world of 100 years later, the party was and is the weapon. It's the illusion that made everyone blind until the crash. And we have another one of those coming. As you know, I've started doing commercials on the show about collapse protocol, which I all wish you would pay attention to. And I'll do one at some point in the show in between the segments. So I know that I have said that I am going to throw down about religion. And I have many things to say about this Christian religion. I'm not going to say them all now, but this whole party thing with Trump's party and Gatsby's party, were there any parties in the Old Testament? Yeah. Belshazzar. So you have Belshazzar's party, which I'm going to tell you about. Now, let me tell you about that first. Belshazzar's party, this is the original, quote, a little party never hurt nobody party. This is Belshazzar's feast. Now, this is the moment every self-righteous religious blowhard, and from that, you get what my take is on it here. But listen to me anyway, you religious guys. loves to quote, because we believe in political repentance here. You can listen to what I'm saying on Politics by Jake, and you can repent. So just listen to what I have to say. This is the moment that every self-righteous religious blowhard loves to quote, but never actually understands. Now, who's King Belshazzar? He was the person who took over and is talked about in the book of the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament. And he's an arrogant man. He's drunk. He's high on his own fumes. And he throws a massive, gaudy party while the Persian army is literally outside the walls. And he's so intoxicated with his own invincibility, he brings out the sacred vessels looted from the temple in Jerusalem, and he uses them as party cups. Then, just as he's doing it, the entire room freezes because a hand, just a hand, a disembodied hand, appears and writes across the plaster. What did it write? Does everybody know? So we repeat it in Radio Land while I'm saying it here in the studio. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. And what does that mean? It means you've been weighed, you've been measured, you've been found wanting, your kingdom is over. And moving back and forth between generations, the DJ doesn't even get to finish the track. Belshazzar dies that night. His empire collapses that night. And the untouchable elite, drunk on their own glow, they fall before they even realize the music is stopped. This is a biblical warning with regard to the Great Gatsby and with regard to Donald Trump. Stop pretending everything's fine when everything's actually on fire. Because just like Belshazzar, Gatsby's world dances while doom approaches. Broken marriages, class cruelty, industrial rot, and the human cost that nobody wants to name. Like I said, the party is a narcotic. It's a smokescreen. It's a collective hallucination that the dream isn't already dying. Everyone's pretending, just like now, that the kingdom isn't already cracking. And what happens? Well, Gatsby dies. He dies for the illusion. And the Buchanans, they walk away untouched. So, coming 100 years later to the present, what is Trump's gala? Honestly, he destroyed half of the White House, or nearly half of it, in order to do it. In order to create a glittering distraction while democracy erodes, a champagne toast or toasts while rights disappear, a celebration thrown by people who desperately don't want to look at the bill that's coming due. And it is coming due. That's what Collapse Protocol is about. It's Belshazzar from the book of Daniel, just with better lighting. It's Gatsby, probably with cheaper champagne. It's the same ancient pattern, you religious types. Power partying as the empire buckles. And I submit to you, the handwriting is already on the wall. Deficits are exploding. Institutions are collapsing. Authoritarian rot is spreading. People are starving. The homeless are being thrown out of their homes. It's a nation spiritually hollowed out, while the elites, they pose for selfies. Belshazzar, he didn't believe the warning either. Gatsby, he didn't see the tragedy until the bullet hit. And now, these clowns are laughing at you, the American people. My listeners, which is why I feel a little righteous indignation about it, because my listeners are being laughed at by this man-child, this poor little rich boy who has ascended to the presidency, illegally, I might add, laughing at you under a banner saying, "A little party never hurt nobody." But history whispers back, my listeners, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. You've been weighed, Donald Trump. You've been measured, Donald Trump. And the party, one way or another, it's going to end in blood. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine being invisible to creditors, identity thieves, and lawsuits, protected and secure no matter what. Virtual invisibility uses proven business and legal strategy to shield your assets and your privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind, and that includes you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control today. Call 213-465-0639 or go to Facebook, facebook.com/Twain Consulting, and make yourself truly untouchable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. All right, and this is Politics by Jake, and this is back. Hope you enjoyed that segment. It kind of tied together ancient history with more modern history of 100 years ago, and then the history that's happening right now. The most important thing to do is to compromise and proscribe however we can using political tools. Don't anybody think that Jake is such a wild-eyed radical that, he proposes extrajudicial means, extra political means. I do not. Another 2 years of this, what I've just talked about occurring, including the demolition psychosis of Donald Trump, where he basically destroyed an entire wing of the White House to put up a gala ballroom. After November 2026, if we don't stop it, it's getting into the area of irreversible damage, and, arguably, I would say we're already there in some cases. Irreversible damage, extreme danger of very, very untoward events, very dangerous, possibly catastrophic events for the country that we really, really, really need to avoid. So that's the issue. In order to address this and to look at it as Congress comes back into session and passes the spending bill, which threatens to cut off housing, it threatens to take the food out of people's mouths, threatens to take the heat out of people's homes, it threatens to cut, in the case of Medicaid, $880 billion over 10 years, to cut Obamacare, which of course Trump despises Obamacare because he despises Obama. All of this and more, we have to take an honest look at the course of the Democratic Party, and I'm going to do that now in this show. And it's not going to be pretty because I'm a Democrat. But I'm a different kind of a Democrat. I'm not a corporatist. I'm not a Clintonista. I'm not a color Democrat. I'm a New Deal kind of Democrat. I am not for the color groups, etc. And we're going to talk about all of this stuff right now. Now, for the average person, if you've lived on this planet for 20 or 30 years, and this really includes a lot of the Latino places, many of whom are now becoming voting blocs in this country, socialism, and the even idea of socialism, It's a monstrosity. Why? Because it's a failure. I mean, that was the socialist bloc. The socialist countries, remember? You had the Warsaw Pact countries, remember that? You had Comecon. You had the Soviets. You had the Eastern European satellites. Even China still, I guess they still do lip service to that. But communist or socialist dictatorships, as the case may be, they all struck out. They retarded the most discredited formula in the world. And for a while, it seemed like only the Maoists were hanging on it and really not even them. And those are the facts. And that is why it is my position that if you're lucky enough to be a Democrat, you better embrace the most successful political formula and method of coalition model that we've got in the modern world, which is the Franklin Delano Roosevelt New Deal. Look, this is what made America great, folks. Forget Lindbergh and America First. Forget Trump and make America great again. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal defeated fascism. It defeated Nazism. It defeated Japanese militarism and monarchy. This held Stalin at bay. This eventually outlasted the entire Soviet Union, freed Eastern Europe, put a man on the moon, brought him back alive. And similarly, in other words, it's the first society in history of the world in which the middle class is the numerical majority of the society, and was so until about 2015. That's the New Deal. And it's not socialism. Socialism, look, socialism with their nomenclatura, right? That's just kind of a thinly disguised modern aristocracy of the party and so forth. And that's where we are. People who insist on wanting democratic socialism, which is a failure, everyone. And if you don't believe me, look at the plight of the British Labour Party right now. That's democratic socialism right there. The Germans have had it under the Social Democrats, the SPD. The Italians had it under the PSI, Craxi. The French had it under François Mitterrand, who did at least nationalize some industries. And there is a place, honestly, for the nationalization of some industries. I don't think we're going to go into that now, but we can go into that another show. I've talked about it before, which most of these characters don't show any sign, really, of doing. And Mamdani is now the mayor of New York, one of the largest cities in the world. Interestingly, a Muslim is also the mayor of London. And although Mamdani is on record there that he got to seize the means of production, although I don't ever think he's taken any concrete steps. So beware trendy. Is it trendy? The trendy-sounding Democratic Socialists of America, they are extremely sectarian, extremely doctrinaire, suspect in the sense that they are a very well-heeled bunch. This is not exactly the exploited masses, the wretched of the earth, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, and stuff like that. So, the problem of the Democratic Party is, first of all, the Democratic Socialists of America are practicing what is known as entrism. And what entrism is, it is the attempt to go into a political formation, an already existing political formation. And then, by careful maneuvering, and let's face it, by deception, tomfoolery, shenanigans, to take it over. And we have this proliferation of different groups around the Democratic Socialists. We've had in recent years the Justice Democrats, I think, with Chakrabarty, who was associated with AOC. We had the brand new Congress, that was in the late teens. And we've now got in particular the Democratic Socialists with Mamdani, who want to take over an executive position, and he has. And this is no longer the Senate. It's no longer the House. It's no longer members of the city council, members of the state legislature, things like this. But this is an attempt to seize executive power. So Mamdani is now, as I've said many times, even before he was the mayor of New York, he's the mayor of New York. one of the great cities of the entire earth. And you have the city of London, also a practicing Muslim named Sadiq Khan. And he is actually doing pretty well. He took office on May 9th, 2016. He was reelected in 2024 for a third term. So he's the first person of any religion, of any political persuasion, to serve 3 terms as the mayor of London. So this is noteworthy. So you have Mamdani in New York, and you have Khan in London. And this is modeled on Leon Trotsky, this entrism. He actually called it entrism sui generis, which is sui generis Latin. In other words, a unique form of entrism sui generis, unique in and of itself. They practiced vis-a-vis the French Socialist Party, 1936. This is where it started. It's basically Trotskyism. Trotskyism, for various reasons, seems to infect much of this sector that calls itself socialist, with all sorts of different names. In the U.S. and France, it's big. In Britain, there have also been significant Trotskyist, Trotskyite organizations. So Mamdani, of course, has been stressed in these debates by Cuomo, and of course it's all over the shouting now, but just, to go do a forensic analysis, and also by Sliwa. Mamdani is someone with no resume. He has no experience. He has no achievements. He has accomplished almost nothing in life until now. And so for him to ascend to the mayoralty of one of the great cities of the earth, this is a stunning moment. And of course, he has, the one thing he has accomplished is to make himself the uncontested darling of the New York media and the national media. And when this happens, you have to ask yourself why. And actually, the reason why is because the media wants you to pick your leader. And if you don't do it, they will. And it'll usually be an ultra-left, sectarian person, like that. Now, the concern is this, that things have gone so far that Zoran Mamdani is the new face of the Democratic Party. But the question is that good? Is that something that we want? And I say, honestly, if he is the new face of the Democratic Party, run for your lives. But I'm afraid, for now, that's what's going to get traction. Now, you could say, therefore, that Mamdani, and this is kind of where I'm going with this, is in effect a GOP attack line. If to the extent that Mamdani becomes the face of the Democratic Party this year and next year, this is a serious millstone, a serious albatross around the neck of every Democratic candidate, all the way to Hawaii and Alaska and every place else. You've heard me say, west of the Hudson, watch out. It's a tremendous handicap to be weighed down by all of this baggage. And then, of course, there's a final phase after that. As I said, over there in Forest Hills, expensive place, not cheap. So, Bernie goes there, and Bernie says AOC, and I would have to say, God help us, heaven forbid. God forbid. This would be AOC. This would be a nationwide landslide with something like McGovern, I guess. And what did McGovern win? He won 2 states. District of Columbia, something like that. And you'll find that when the Democratic Party goes all to the left, that's what happens. And now we're over on this segment, so I'm going to take a break. We'll be right back, and we'll complete this. And this is Politics by Jake. The world is unraveling fast. Governments are weakening, markets are crashing, chaos is looming. You need more than hope. You need a plan. Collapse Protocol gives you the tools to protect your assets, secure your future, and survive the storm. Don't wait for the collapse to hit. Prepare now. Visit Twain Consulting at facebook.com/Twain Consulting or call 213-465-0639. Collapse Protocol, your shield when everything else fails. Okay, this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And we've been talking about the Democratic Socialist and how it could be bad. And we're going back to McGovern, who was really kind of like that. And when we went to the presidency, he'd like won 2 states in the District of Columbia, something like that. And you'll find that when the Democratic Party goes all to the left, it's happened starting in 1972, that's McGovern, 72 Nixon, 68 Nixon, 76 Carter, which turned out to be a disaster, 80 Reagan, 84 Reagan, 88 Bush the Elder. It took until 1992 to get a Democratic candidate back in there. So how many elections? That's 6 elections. 6 elections and 6 Democratic defeats, 6 Republican wins. And that's what you get for going too far in the radical direction. But no matter how bad things are in Washington, we'll talk about this maybe a few times towards the end. No matter how bad things are in Washington, no matter how much Nixon, Watergate is running amok, you've got to control yourself and stay focused on what? Working people, their economic needs, kitchen table economics. That's always job one. You've got to add, look at what's going on now. Look at why the Republicans are having such a hard time in the aftermath of this shutdown. Kitchen table economics. They're literally taking the food out of people's mouths. The President of the United States wants people to go hungry just so he can get done. The President of the United States is the president of all the people. You don't do this. You've got to add a lot of other things. You've got to add solutions on healthcare. This is talking about the Democrats. Now, the Republicans will never do this. You've got to add solutions on healthcare, the social safety net, trade union rights. You've got to look at things that are of interest, things like food stamps, the high-protein WIC program for young mothers, expectant mothers, all of the things like this. And I've talked about these things a lot. But the idea is start with bread and butter. Bread and butter, kitchen table issues, mass traction economic demands. That's what you do. Not the kind of, what can we say, lifestyle issues or wedge issues. These are really wedge issues that misguided Democrats try to turn against, I don't know who. They think they can succeed by following these things. And the problem is you can't. You need to be grounded. Your anchor, your stability, job one is always going to be that living standard. The standard of living, conditions of labor, longevity of your workforce, which lends to productivity. It's an easy argument to make. It's amazing that anybody misses it. Housing, President Trump wants to take away housing from the homeless, throw them all out on the street. Believe me, many of them are on the street now. Availability of interest, upward social mobility. You better have those too. And not these other things, not AOC's Green New Deal. I don't. She's a smart person. I don't know why she ever did that. Not this defund the police stuff, not this gender theory stuff, and so on down the line. You know, you can recite the entire catalog here towards the end, but you get the idea. It can't be those things. Fortunately, there are forces in the Democratic Party that are grimly committed to this. And I should say, unfortunately. And they are, of course, the groups. And what do I mean by the groups? I mean the identity groups, the racial groups, the ethnic groups, the religious groups, the pressure groups, the environmentalist groups, and so forth. This constellation of there's like 150 to 200 different groups who have money, who do fundraising. They have financial angels behind them. They've been around. They have continuity. And to the extent that they control the Democratic Party, what you get is a series of fragmented demands. These are generally non-negotiable. They're a contest. Inside each of these groups, the leadership is generally, who's the most uncompromising. And with that, you're just going in all directions again. The defeat of Kamala Harris seems to be due, at least in significant measure, to the so-called trans ad, which was a tape of Kamala from sometime before, I guess, 2019 to 2020 primary season. Ill-advised, in my opinion. I think in 2019 is when this happened. And she said, it doesn't matter whether it's right or whether it's wrong. She said, I think that, and we're talking about politics here. We're talking about how this plays in Peoria. You know the old saying, Peoria is in Iowa. Just good, basic people. Basically, they eat, they work, and they sleep. That basically the Iowans are. I've been among them many times. They're good, basic people, and that's who they are. How is stuff like this going to play in Peoria? And here we go. She said, I think that having sex change operations for illegal aliens that are in prison, and to do that at government expense, that's a great thing. And others should have access to that too. And that seems to have been half of the Republican, honestly, that seems to have been about half of the Republican paid television advertising in the week or two before the election in these flyover zone areas. And you've got to ask yourself, why is it? Why does the Democratic Party allow itself to be talked into unpopular demands like this that don't play in Peoria? Because these demands reflect the internal struggles of these different groups, right? It's usually groups of political operatives. You know, they're competing for the money. Some rich person doesn't have that many political smarts. They've got to somehow win that person over. And of course, if you have a group that has only one purpose, everybody wants to hear that. That's the most important thing in the world. And that everybody else should be sacrificed in order to get to the goal, right? So it's narrow. It's sectarian. It's doctrinaire. It ignores the big picture. And that's why we're here trying right now to go through this big picture. Doing a forensic analysis of the election, in which, you know, by the way, the Democrats did very well. So that's my starting point. It's an appeal to all Democratic voters to say, if you vote for Mamdani, you're endangering the possible victory of Democrats in 2026 for this reason. You're actually, just the fact that you're showing up at the tennis stadium for this rally, that's going to play really well in northern New Jersey. That's going to be a real showstopper. And indeed, in northern Virginia, similar story. They're not, they follow that stuff too. Okay, let's try to get back to some of the historical roots of this systemic problem, really, in the Democratic Party, which goes back a ways. So let's try to go back. It's the weakness of the Democratic Party in conditions of political stress. The Democratic Party often does function as a kind of leaderless group, especially if they've lost an election and there's no obvious leader to the party. The Democratic Party often becomes a plaything for outside groups, right? Practicing, entrism like a Zora Mamdani. If the government in Washington, if the Republicans are really going wild in Washington, if it's oppressive, it's a reactionary, if there's a war going on, if there's monstrous corruption, we pretty much have all of this in mind. The Democratic Party can be dragged or propelled or impelled, compelled into moments of really political malpractice, political apology. Remember the old saying, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. So the experiential marketing, Democratic Party seems to have a lot of experientials. I've said it many times. This person during the Obama years, he said, hey, I'm for Obama. And he said, I know, I'm being duped by Obama. But being duped by Obama is the best thing I've got going in my entire life. And I really want, I'm going to hang on, getting duped by Obama. This is this guy talking. Because that's better than anything else I have going for me. So you could say this is a very candid self-awareness. A lot of people don't have that. But the idea is to tend towards ideological maximalism, to tend towards a kind of non-practical, non-realistic world And in particular, it often takes, I guess, the majority of times it becomes ultra-left sectarianism, which is what we have now. AOC and Bernie, I actually like them. What they seem to have as plans, which I think are just unworkable, totally unrealistic. And if you really want some of those economic goals, and you can make a case for that, but you couldn't be going for the Green New Deal and deindustrialization and energy austerity and defund the police and gender theory and all of these other things that they have. In other words, they load themselves with rather unpopular cultural points. They seem to embrace a whole series of wedge issues from the Liat water period right back to the, around 1990 and slightly earlier in South Carolina. Remember the Vietnam era. Vietnam era meant the Vietnam War, the losing war, and it meant the military draft, almost unimaginable today, although it could happen before you know it. An unimaginable draft situation, very unpopular. No idea really expressed by the Johnson and particularly Nixon, who kept going it longer. Why do this? What is the goal? What is the strategy? What is the benefit? Vietnam, Watergate, various other forms of corruption turned into the radicalization of the Democratic Party. We're talking about these elections. Nixon won in 68 and 72. Carter, I mentioned this, I'm going over it again. Carter won in 76. Mondale, again, lost in 84. Dukakis lost in 88. Had to wait all the way until 1992 for Clinton to finally win an election. Now, why was the Democratic Party reduced to impotence so that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elections? 6. And only 2 Democratic victories. It's because the party became too radical, too cultural for the mass of U.S. voters. Again, how will it play in Peoria? And we've got these right. The defeat of McGovern was, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, landslide for the Republicans ever. Similarly, the defeat of Mondale, 84, also very one-sided in the Electoral College. Dukakis in 88, oh my God, turns out to be Bush with 470 votes in the Electoral College, also quite one-sided. Then you get Clinton, who manages to win twice. So again, what went wrong? It is this tendency to respond to very bad conditions in Washington with a kind of excessive radicalization where you lose track of the basic economic demands that are necessary to keep your working class, working people, lower middle class base. So that you're talking ideology about this. And you can see that after 2 terms of Nixon, Nixon and Ford, 8 years, Carter comes in, as I think I said for a lot of people, 1977 came in, they said, well, Carter can now do what LBJ, Lyndon Johnson did and that Kennedy tried to do, which was return to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt New Deal and continue the development of the New Deal, which Johnson, of course, had done with Medicare, Medicaid, and the Office of Economic Opportunity, War on Poverty, and other programs, which I think were extraordinarily beneficial. But he ruined everything by doing the Vietnam War and the military draft, and that's a real tragedy for him and the country. And the problem is this. Carter was quite different. Carter did not have clarity on these issues, and I guess maybe it's because he's from the South. Carter treated trade unions were treated as special interest, just one special interest among others, like the oil lobby, the airline lobby, large corporations. And the way Carter responded was to really embrace austerity. And everybody hated this. In other words, when Carter said malaise, and he didn't say it, but that was the term that was used to summarize the awful speech he made in 1979 in the summertime, as I recall. He went to Camp David and fired half his cabinet and so forth. And the malaise was he wanted energy austerity. And this is incompatible with the needs of working people. Working people have no tolerance for energy austerity. They've got to get to work. They've got to buy gas and so forth. All right, and unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll have to continue this at another time. This is Politics by Jake, the next edition of Politics by Jake, will be November 16th, and we look forward to seeing you then. Until then, goodbye and good luck, and have a pleasant day.